We're going to take quite a bit of time to talk about international marketing and international business. In addition to this information I'll give you from Chapter 3, we also have two guest speakers, I hope. Monica Snow has already recorded about a 50-minute presentation for you on international business in general, why it's relevant, some of the numbers and facts about international business today. She also talks a little bit about the international programs at Wright State. We'll also have Miss Debbie Durr, and Debbie's going to do a presentation for us. She is with the Department of Commerce, and she's a specialist in international trade, and she will be doing a presentation on what they do as an organization, why it's relevant, why it's important, and really talk about what she is as a resource to companies that are trying to go international. Okay? So we're going to start with this today, and I'm going to walk you through the more traditional part of international. Okay, for Chapter 3, we have some objectives. One of them is understand the big picture, and it certainly is a big one. Many aspects of what companies are trying to do, they're going global whether they know it or not. Talk about some of the organizations, and Debbie Durr's organization is one of those, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but there are many organizations here to support world trade. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the influences on companies going international and some of the strategies to enter the global marketplace. The global marketplace, world trade, it is the flow of goods and services among different countries, the value of all the exports and imports of the world's nations. And every company is global whether they know it or not. Just a quick example, there was, and they've been bought now, but a few years ago there was a company in Urbana, Ohio called Freedom Feeds. And they produced fish food, and what was different about their fish food is that it was not genetically re-engineered. And some countries, and it was either Denmark or Norway or one of those, let's say Norway just because I don't remember, they got on the internet and they found Freedom Feeds' webpage. Now, Freedom Feeds was not international then at all. And because of this being fish food that was not genetically re-engineered, that was the only kind that Norway could feed to its fish farms. So they contacted Freedom Feeds, and Freedom Feeds didn't have a clue as to how to do this sort of international business. So they called down here, and we put an intern up there. Was one of our international business interns, and he worked with them to get all the documentation ready, look at the laws, the restrictions, the legal issues of exporting their fish food. And while he was there, they actually exported the first set of products to Norway. And it was very interesting, but that's happening to companies everywhere today, that they are international, whether they like it or know it or not. Okay, steps in going international. Obviously, the first one is to decide whether to do it or not, and there are many, many aspects. It's very complex to do this. There are also, let's distinguish between an international market and a global market. Many companies consider themselves to be an international company, and what that really means is that they export or import from another country. Most companies only export to one additional country other than the United States, which indeed does make them an international company, but it doesn't necessarily make them a global company. And global is multiple countries that you are exporting to. Okay, so back to this. Step one, decide whether or not to go global. Second, where are you going to go? And that's not as easy as it may seem. Many companies say, well, obviously China and India because they have billions of people. Well, not necessarily. Depends on what you have, what your products or services are, and many of the aspects of the countries that you're trying to take products into. What is your level of commitment? Do you really want to do this? Are you going to put the effort into it that it requires? There are so many issues in going global. And then finally, how do you adapt your marketing campaign, your marketing mix, your marketing strategies to produce products that are valuable in other countries? Do you keep them the same as the ones you have here in the United States, or do you adapt them to the other country? Okay, just some aspects of why you would go international, and there are many of them. These are pretty much the the most obvious reasons, is that the U.S. market is saturated. Well, it probably is for many companies, many products, because we have so many things here. We're the world's greatest consumers of products and services. So if you can't sell any more products here, go to another country and see if their consumers and population will want your products. There is definitely a trade deficit. It is a huge deficit right now, and we need to send more products abroad. Foreign competition, certainly we have a lot of that, and we should be a competitor in other countries. The emergence of new markets, all the time, every day you look and there's a new country or a new name, or borders have been shifted so that new countries have emerged. Foreign aid programs to assist other countries. Economies of scale, where essentially it's less expensive to produce yet one more product. That works, sometimes it doesn't. Comparative advantage. Do you really have something that's unique to that country? The product life cycle, we'll talk about that when we talk about the product P. But basically, if your product is starting to quote-unquote die in the United States, you might give it some energy or a boost by taking it to other countries. And that you have to go international, you have no choice. Now let's look at why you would not go international, and these are huge. These are enormous reasons. If you have no expertise whatsoever in the country, the language, the social customs, the religion, the currency, on and on and on and on and on, you probably shouldn't do it. If you have absolutely no differential advantage from the products or services that are already there, or that you have no capacity to produce additional products or services, then how could you produce them to send abroad? Okay, I'm not going to go into a lot of the laws. You can read those in your book. And I believe that Debbie and Monica both will talk about these a little bit. But there certainly are many, many, many regional, local, international laws that govern how you do this. There are also a lot of organizations that assist in going international. So this is just an example of some of those, but they'll be covered by Monica and Debbie. Okay, elements of the external environment. Now, we talked about this in strategy, but we also can talk about it in terms of going international. They're the same pieces: the social cultural environment, political legal environment, technological, economic, and competitive environments. And we'll talk about this momentarily. If you need any information about international markets, if you have something you need for a class, or if you're working for a company that's going to go abroad, the World Factbook is an amazing resource. Debbie Durr will also give some resources in her discussion, but there are a lot of them. Economic environment, some of the indicators of economic health, and these are important pieces to understand. First of all, gross domestic product. This term is used all the time in the news media, in government situations. And that's essentially the total dollar value, that's total, that's everything, of goods and services a country produces in a year. Now, the gross national product, that's the value of all goods and services produced by a country's citizens or organizations. All right? The economic infrastructure, this is, I guess, the bigger picture, if you look at it that way. The financial arena, the infrastructure, the distribution systems available, and the communication systems. Okay, when you're looking at countries to go into, you need to realize the level of economic development for those countries. And I won't go into a lot of that. It's obvious that we are a developed country, and that means basically the United States is no longer an agricultural society. We are an industry society. A least developed country, those are those that are still in the agricultural area. Developed countries, well, those are basically the probably broader opportunities for our companies to go into developed countries, only because their population will need more goods, need or want more goods. Okay, competitive environment, there's your competitive intelligence. Think about getting information just in this country, and it's very challenging to do. Think about how difficult that's going to be to do in another country. You have to get the information that's available publicly and probably some of it privately to understand your competition and their strategies, to understand what's going on. And there are a lot of ways to do that. But there again, places like Debbie Durr's organization, they can help do that. That's their function. That's their job. That's the U.S. Commercial Service. And they are part of the Department of Commerce, but they can help companies who are trying to do things international gain this kind of information. That's part of their function. And for the most part, they are federally funded. Competition in the micro environment, now you have to understand the country's consumer population, who they are, what they have, what's their discretionary income. If you think about the income level of some of the population of our developing countries, it's pretty low. In fact, it's very low. Look at the product competition, look at the brand competition. And it's still amazing to me that the top brands in the world are still produced in the United States. Technological environment, that's obvious what that is. It's, all the competitive advantage we may or may not have for our technology. And for the most part, we still drive technology worldwide. You have to think about things like patents also. This goes back to that legal issue. How do you protect your product or service once it's in another country? How do you make sure that it's not pirated, stolen, that the invention, the idea isn't copyright or isn't copied by someone else? And again, that's a legal issue you have to think about. We actually have a person here at Wright State. His name is Rand Rader. He's over physically in the library, the Dunbar Library, and he is a patent expert. He can help get patents for ideas and products and help companies do that. That's another resource we have here. The political and legal environment, there are so many legal issues, and realize that the laws we have here could be completely different from laws in another country. If you are going to go international, I strongly suggest you have an international lawyer, someone who specializes in international law, assist you with that. Our American law is supposed to protect the companies involved, to make sure that neither we nor the incoming company takes advantage of consumers. This is just a list, and again, there are many, 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 many of them. Notice it says partial list. It is very partial. There are a lot of these. This just gives you some of the older laws that are still in effect that you have to consider and understand and appreciate when you go global. And that's why you really need a really good international attorney to help you with these things. These are some of the agencies. Realize again that Debbie Durr is one of these, and she is another resource. She is literally housed here in the College of Business in Wright Hall on the main campus. And it's a wonderful opportunity we have to have that kind of expertise sitting right here in our building. Okay, some of the social cultural environments, we'll talk about these very briefly. Your demographics, think about the differences in ages. We are an aging population. Some of the other countries are not. Cultural values, individualism that we appreciate and value here, which is one of the reasons we have so much trouble doing things like team work. We appreciate individuals as opposed to collectivism that is so commonplace in other countries. Look at the social norms and customs, the language. Ethnocentrism, we'll talk about what that is in just a moment. These are some of the social cultural issues you really have to think about, and some of these should be very obvious given what's going on in the international marketplace today. Religion plays a huge part. The social structure. Many countries, unlike the United States, have a much more structured social class, such as India, although it's not nearly as much so as it used to be, but they have a very structured social class, a caste system, social customs and taboos, what can you do here that you can't do other places, and what may offend someone in another country, that it would never occur to you that it might be a problem. Some of the values and attitudes, aesthetics, what do we value, what do we like about the looks of things, the language, of course that's true within this country. All of these are critical issues, and The message is be prepared, do your research. You're never going to know everything about another country, but you need to be as prepared as you can when you go into international business, but also when you visit another country. Here are what we call the market entry strategies, and they basically look at the level of risk and level of control. And exporting, contractual agreements, strategic alliances, and direct investment. Exporting is the easiest one to do. There is minimal risk, but of course you also have minimal control and you have minimal level of income perhaps. Contractual agreements, those are literally governed by the law. Now you have to be aware that just what our law says in this country may not be relevant in other countries. So you have two kinds of laws governing a contractual agreement. Franchising is probably the most obvious example of that. Strategic alliances, that's a joint venture where your company and another kind of pool their resources to put things together. And then finally, direct investment. That's where you actually put a facility, you build a facility in another country. Oftentimes you will place all of your personnel there and so on and so forth. That gives you the maximum degree of control. It's also the maximum degree of risk, but sometimes that's worth it. It can give you the highest return on income too. Some of the things to think about before you go international. First of all, select the foreign market, and it isn't just about population size. It's about all those things we talked about. For one, back in that social cultural environment, all of this has to be in place. You have to understand all this, but certainly all the legal issues, the infrastructure, and so on. How do you enter the market? Are you going to export? That's the easiest. Also the least return many times. How do you have to adapt the product to go international? In 2006, I took 17 of our undergrad and MBA students to Eastern Germany. And most of the students had never been out of the state of Ohio, let alone to another country. We went over there to see how the companies in Germany were doing or not after the reunification of Germany back in the 90s. And, I tried to tell everybody what it was like, what to do, what not to do. And I told the young ladies, your curling irons, hair dryers will not work over there because the electrical current is different. I told them to get a converter and all those things. Did they listen? No. So we get into our hotel in Jena, Germany. That's way over in Eastern Germany. And we were going to a dinner sponsored by some of the host companies in one of the universities there. And all the girls, of course, it takes forever to get there, and you're jet lagged, and all you want to do is take a shower and get cleaned up and go to bed, but we couldn't do that. So I said to the young ladies, do not use your curling irons or your hair dryers. Okay. So I'm in my room getting ready, and there's a phone call, and all the power on the floor where my students had gone out in the hotel because they had all plugged their hair dryers in at the same time with the converters. Oh, well, I tried. But anyway, product adaptations, such as driving in England, drive on the opposite side of the street, so the steering wheel has to be in our passenger side of the car. Just things like that. Do you adopt the product? Do you adopt the message? What do you do? And then finally, think about the things that you have to organize and control. How are you going to structure the organization and things like that? Are you going to have expats, or how are you going to get your employees involved? Challenges in going global, these are huge. Certainly, first of all, you have shifting borders. You never know from one day to the next what's going to happen in some of these areas of the world, the way countries change, governments take over, they're gone, they're lost, they change the borders. Some of the agreements, such as NAFTA, has assisted with some of this. That's a North American Free Trade Agreement, and Monica Snow talks about that a little bit in her presentation. It's also in your book. That's helped, but it hasn't eliminated all the problems. Unstable governments, that happens everywhere. You read about it, see it in the news. Our government is not particularly stable, if you think about it, because we change or could change political parties every 4 years. Foreign exchange, that's how valuable, what's the dollar value of things, and how do we exchange things back and forth. Corruption, and realize that what is corruption in one country may be perfectly acceptable in another, so that's something you have to think about. What are the ethics and morals? And then, of course, you have something called pirating, and that's another big issue. Why do companies fail? Well, ethnocentric orientation is where you think that you are the best country in the world, that our values, our attitudes, our opinions, the way we do things is the best. That's why we're sometimes called the ugly American, because we do think we're the best, and we aren't. Every country, every culture has strengths and weaknesses, have values that are positive things to have. Ignorance, there's no excuse for ignorance. You need to be educated on what you're doing. You'll never know it all, but you should not go into another country, either for business or for vacation, without understanding that country. You don't want to offend them. The arrogance, thinking we know it all, and we really don't. And time factor is another big one. Time is not the same in other countries, certainly places like Spain or Hispanic countries where they do their afternoon siestas and things. So time is very different. The first dinner that my students had when we were in Eastern Germany, we showed up and it was this lovely restaurant, and they had decided on this really nice menu for us. And we got there at 7 o'clock. It was on I believe, a Saturday evening, 7 o'clock, and we finished dinner at 2 a.m. Of course, my students were going nuts because they wanted to go out and hit all the bars, but and that's very normal. That dinner time is a time to socialize and interact and get to know each other, and certainly for families, that's a very important piece of their culture. So that's the overview of international marketing, international business. Again, Debbie and Monica will be giving you more information on this. Now, Chapter 3 also contains ethics, and there's a separate presentation, a separate recording on ethics, so I would appreciate if you could go over that at a different time. So anyway, have fun, take care, and I hope you're doing well, and we will continue on with our marketing.